So, I wanted to make a journal entry about what I do for a living and a study that has significantly changed my life. And that is my role as a tarot reader and sort of a therapist or a healer who tries to help people understand the mysteries of their life through the use of tarot cards. And that energy is represented by the High Priestess, which is the second card in the major arcana of the tarot system. So I made a journal entry, and that's what you're seeing here. Now, the High Priestess is associated with the moon in terms of heavenly bodies that are attributed to her. And the crescent moon shows up at her feet, and two crescent moons on her crown, along with a full moon, which I'll talk about here more in a little bit. But I did this journal entry during a full moon, during a total eclipse in February. And so I definitely incorporated the moon energy because the moon is always female, to quote Marge Piercy. It definitely represents sort of the divine feminine, which is what the High Priestess represents to me. It's female spirituality that has been in the unconscious of men and women in our culture, but not readily accessed. And that's sort of what the High Priestess represents. You have to be initiated into her wisdom. You have to be invited into her temple, and she may or may not reveal to you what is behind the veil. Now, the moon is a card and a symbol that represents the unconscious. And in the unconscious mind is where a lot of people's truth lies. And I think that spirituality is really just a connection to your own inner truth. And in this journal entry, I used a lot of blues and greens. Green represents love to me, blue is water, emotions. I used purples to represent spirituality, and I used red to represent blood. And as you'll see in a little bit here, that's to me representative of menstrual blood. And that was a turning point for me in doing my art journal, because I hesitated because I thought, oh, people might think that's gross, menstrual blood. And it was almost like a force. Put my finger in some red paint and smeared it on the page before I could talk myself out of it. Now, the veil of the High Priestess is something that hides the truth of the matter, and she guards it, and she may or may not reveal to you what is behind it. You have to prove that you are worthy of this knowledge. And on her veil are pomegranates, which represent fertility, kind of a divine womb, so to speak. The veil rests between two pillars that are black and white, and there's all kinds of stuff written about this, so I'm just really sharing my personal take on it, which is the yin and the yang, the male and the female, the light and the dark. This here is her headdress, which is thought to represent the triple goddess, the maiden, the mother, and the crone. In a lot of pagan traditions, the maiden represents a new beginning, birth, youth, fresh energy, and innocence. And the mother represents that sort of ripe, fertile, creative, sexual, full, a very fulfilled kind of way of being. And then the crone represents the accumulation of years and years of wisdom, and death and endings and transformation, and divinity. And so the High Priestess possesses all three of these on her crown, which, if you are able to understand that cycle, then you are able to understand the cycles of life. For this page, I used the High Priestess card from the Celestial Tarot because she's standing on the moon, and I love that she is topless and exposed and very comfortable in her femininity and her connection to the moon. In my own life, I've always just craved sort of a spiritual teacher that was female. I think that's something that I've always wanted, and I've never really had until I discovered the High Priestess. And then I started to discover the High Priestess within myself. And so I became my own female spiritual presence, and in the course of that came upon other women who follow their own unique spiritual path of discovering truth. The High Priestess is associated with the number 2 because she is the second person that the Fool encounters on his journey. And the first person is the Magician. And then he stumbles upon the High Priestess, who initiates him to some of the more hidden elements of the emotions, the subconscious, and gives him some of that knowledge to take with him on his journey. Now, for the other page, I used the Inner Voice card from Osho Zen Tarot, which is that deck's version of the High Priestess, and a Rider-Waite version, more the traditional. Now, the Inner Voice is one of my favorite cards because it really does just spell out directly. That's what it is. It's your inner voice. It's your inner knowing. It's your intuitive wisdom. It is something that you can't get from a church or a temple as much as you get from within yourself, your own truth. And so there is an encouragement to take it seriously, but at the same time not too seriously, because and that's what on his card, on the Osho Zen card, the dolphins represent, a playfulness of dolphins, and they're incredibly wise and intuitive, but they're very playful and silly. And so when we don't take ourselves too seriously, we can actually tune into our inner voice a lot better than if we're very ritualistic and somber and serious, or trying to fit into some standard. And so spontaneity and playfulness can oftentimes get us in touch with our inner voice, which is basically what the inner voice and the High Priestess is trying to teach. Look at the light, look at the dark, look at what is not easily seen, honor all phases of life, and take the time to know your truth. So here are the final entries. I really fell in love with these, and I decided that I wanted to make them available at my Etsy shop, ArtofSelfLove.etsy.com. And so what I've done is I've turned them into prints, and rather than using the various tarot cards that I used in my journal entry, I have created veils that I've placed over each card, and on each veil is a sacred symbol that resonates with the energy and the meaning of the High Priestess card. And so you still get a sense of what the archetype of the High Priestess represents. And the meaning for each of those symbols are available with the print. So please feel free to check them out at artofselflove.etsy.com. In the description box, I'll have a link that you can go to if you are interested in learning more about them. So I want to thank you for taking the time to let me share with you my art journal entries and to share a little bit with you about what the High Priestess means to me.
Let's cut out the melodrama so we can wake up the whole wide world. Let's make up and start all